We would be solving the remaining 25 questions for the CBSE NET December 2015 paper for psychology, paper 3. Now, as we have discussed the various questions in the previous paper, the previous set, most of the questions came from either biopsychology. Here also you have lot of questions that you will see from the field of biopsychology. We will be covering all the sets of biopsychology questions in the further lectures that we will do. So the first question here, now this is a question which is based on direct definition. So encoding failure is information is not attended to encoding. So that's the correct match. Then proactive interference. Proactive interference means what is already in your memory interferes with your new memory. For example, if I am commuting daily and the previous bus number was 459 and my new bus number is 128. Because of this, I will remember this number much strongly as compared to this number, and this number would cause a proactive interference in my memory pattern. Next is decay. Decay is information that is not accessed or evades from the storage over time. And finally, retroactive interference means new information overtakes the old information. That means if you have these two bus numbers, I'll better remember the new bus number as compared to the older bus number. So this is how we define the concept. So you have 2, then 4, then 1 and 3. So 2, 4, 1 and 3 would be the correct match here. Next question. Language affects our thought process and language affects our ability to store information. So according to the Whorfian hypothesis, he gave the linguistic relativity theory and he said that language affects our ability to store information, and as a result it also affects our thought process. So that is by definition what is the linguistic relativity hypothesis. So both of them are correct and reason explains the assertion correctly. Next question. Now trace the right sequence of hypothetical series of events by MacLeod in context of an arc. An arc means the motivation for achievement. So when we talk about kids and their motivation for achievement, what happens is from the perspective of parents, they try to develop self-reliance as one of the primary values in the kids. Because of the self-reliance, what would happen is there would be more independence training by the parents. So parents will want their kids to remain more independent. They will allow the kids to commit mistake. Committing mistake would not be considered as a negative aspect. Rather, it would be considered as a part of achievement in learning. So developing independence, giving them, allowing them to make mistakes, giving them opportunity for self-confidence and self-training would be part of it. Then what would happen is you can see higher achievement levels in children, and finally this would promote economic growth. So the order would be D, B, A and C, and this matches with 2. So 2 would be the correct choice here. Next question. Now these are the various concepts of creativity that we will be discussing in the further lecture. So for now you can directly know them. So little c is known as the everyday creativity. Big C is the creativity in eminent personalities or eminence we can say. Pro C is the creativity for a specific profession, and mini C is individual's own creativity which varies from one person to another. So you have these as the correct match. So the answer would be 1. Next question. Projective techniques are difficult to standardize and norm. Projective techniques are not time tests. Now what is an example of projective technique? I can say it's the ink blot test. So when I say it's an ink blot test, what happens is you have a blot of ink on the paper and the subject is asked to comprehend that. So when he is comprehending that, he can comprehend it in any manner. He can consider that to be a plant, to be an animal, to be a family or anything. That's a kind of very open-ended test. So projective tests first of all are very open-ended. Usually in a set of tests they give you 20 questions or 30 such sets, but they do not define a fixed time in which you need to complete it. So this is correct. and they are difficult to standardize because each person can comprehend that blot in a different manner. So it varies from every individual and it's very hard to standardize and norm it. So both of these are correct, but this does not really explain the assertion. So I can say both of them are independently correct, but the reason does not explain the assertion. So 2 would be the correct answer here. Next question. Now this is a very interesting question. Now first of all, there are few things you need to remember it very clearly in this. The subject is 19-year-old. The test that is being conducted is Wechsler's test for children. Now first of all, it's a mismatch. This is a test for children and it's conducted on a 19-year-old person. So use of appropriate test would be definitely an issue here. Then the test was to be conducted by a psychologist but is being conducted by a clerical staff. The psychologist is just reading the reports. So it's the professional qualification of the tester does not match, because a psychologist can well adjust that student or that subject to the surrounding and can guide him through the test process, while a clerical staff is not a subject expert. So professional qualification of the tester would be an issue. Then finally what happens is a Xerox copy of the material is shared with the child's parents. That means there is an issue of privacy. So the records are shared with the parents, so there is an issue of privacy rather than copyright, but here it's copyright, so we can consider this as one of the answers. So A, B and C would be the correct choice here, because since A and B are correct, there is no other thing that we can mention, and there is nothing which is being talked in regard to the culture fair testing. Culture fair testing means it should be valid across cultures, so it's not like this test is meant for Americans and you are administering it to Africans, so it's nothing like that. So there is no issue of culture fair testing. So A, B and C would be the choices here. Next question. Now sleep, this time there were 2 questions on sleep and both of them were kind of very important questions touching the major sections of the sleep mechanism. So we will be immediately after this we will be covering a class on sleep and dreams where we will be discussing this. For now we will be directly moving forward. So stage 1 sleep, what happens in the stage 1 sleep is, so stage 1 sleep is low voltage high frequency EEG signals that you can see in the stage 1 sleep. What happens in stage 2 sleep is there is occasional presence of delta waves. Sleep spindles are waxing and waning bursts of 12 to 14 Hz of waves, while K complexes are single large negative and positive wave. So negative wave is the upward deflection and the positive wave is the downward deflection. So K complexes are very prominent. K complexes in sleep bundles are commonly found in stage 2. We'll be referring these again in the next question that we have. So for now you have the K complex as 1, splits as 4. So you have 2, 3, 4 and 1 as the correct choice. So 2, 3, 4 and 1 as the correct choice. Next question. Now here, so we have the various stages of sleep. It's a stage 1, 2, 3, 4 and then you have the re-emergent stage 1. So you have the sleep cycle that starts with the stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 and then you have the emergent stage 1. Now emergent stage 1, first of all, these all are included under the non-rapid eye movement sleep, while emergent is included under rapid eye movement sleep. Now there are 3 things that we usually measure under a sleep. One is EEG, EMG and EOG. EEG talks about electroencephalograph, that talks about the brain waves. EMG talks about the muscle tone. Oculograph talks about the eye movements. So as the name suggests, emergent stage 1, which is REM sleep or paradoxical sleep, is rapid eye movement stage. As a result, there would be definite changes in electroocular changes. So C would be the correct choice. So we can straightforwardly remove the first two ones. Now we have to see what are the different things that are given here. So K complex and sleep spindle, as I previously said, are characteristics of stage 2, but researchers have shown that K complex at a difference of more than 3 minutes can be seen in the emergent stage 1, but if the difference is less than 3 minutes, they would be part of NREM, that's non-rapid eye movement sleep. Okay, so if the difference between the two K complexes is more than 3 minutes, we can consider those to be under emergent stage 1 or part of REM sleep. If it is less than 3 minutes, it would be under non-REM sleep, first of all. Next, in emergent stage 1, you have beta activity. And it's important to note that the curves on the EEG for beta activity are similar to those of sleep spindle, but they are not sleep spindles. Sleep spindles can be found in emergent stage 1 rarely in the patients who have or who suffer from sleep deprivation, but that's a very, very rare phenomena. So we usually do not include this as one of the major phenomena, but there are phasic twitches of muscle that occurs during emergent stage 1, and therefore since there are phasic twitches of muscles, usually you will see a smooth running EMG, but suddenly you will see a spike and then it would be smooth and then there would be spike in an EMG. So you can see there are four things that are asked. Two of them relate to EEG, one of these relates to EOG, and one of these relate to EMG. So all these three are seen in emergent stage 1 sleep, while sleep spindles are not seen in emergent stage 1. This was a very, very interesting question, and as a result we would be covering this in detail in a further lesson where we will be talking about sleep and dreams only. So here the answer would be 4. Next question. Self is conceptualized in Western and Eastern perspective of personality as. Now, supposedly there is one of my favorite toys or favorite things that I have and I lose that. As per the Western philosophy, what would happen? I would say I am sad because I lost it. But the Eastern philosophy believes that a person is sad not just because he lost it, but because he is affectionate, or I could say emotionally attached to that thing. So what is happening here is, here there is a concept of free, and here it is a kind of deterministic concept. So Vivekananda did a lot of studies, specifically when we talk about Eastern philosophies. And what is important to understand here is Ishwar or God, as per the Indian philosophy, is only who is free. All of us are bound by something or are deterministic. So the correct answer here would be free as per the Western philosophy and deterministic as per the personality trait of self in the Eastern philosophy. So answer would be 1. Next question. Now various scholars and their hypothesis. So Cattell gave the investment hypothesis where he said that the crystallized information is generated through investment in fluid intelligence. So that was the concept. Then Jensen talked about assertive mating, that similar organisms or like organisms have better mating. Sternberg talked about creativity, wisdom and thinking in his triarchic intelligence model. So he talked about wisdom, and Spearman finally talked about positive manifold, where he talked about the many factors of factor analysis and the largest factor that can be included. Calais personality construct theory talked about one postulate to a corollary. Then you corollary. Then you have Murray's stat theory. Now Murray's stat was considered to have around 20 needs. Now it's important to understand that this question is specifically given for students to get confused with tat here and tat here. So this is something students usually don't remember since it's based on rote learning. So what they usually do is, so Murray's tat theory and 11 categories of scoring tat, so this should be the correct match. So what they will do is they will straight away match these, but that is not the correct answer here. So Murray's stat theory is based on 20 needs. Then you have the Macleod's-Atkinson's measure of an arc, and that is based on the 11 categories of tat scores. And then finally you have the Rotor's scale, which talks about 6 subcategories of needs and goals. So these are the correct matches for this question. Next question. The basic sound or of consonant or vowel is known as phonemes. Then you have morpheme is the smallest meaningful word. So phonemes are the sounds da, ba. Morpheme is the smallest meaningful word like dada, mama. So then you have the syntax. Syntax is a combination of words to make meaningful phrases. And finally, application of language in social context would be pragmatics. This we will be covering in detail in the lesson on language. Next question. You have the assertion and reasons. Now this is based on the decay theory of forgetting. We have already covered the theories of forgetting, so you can just refer to that video for more details. So here, based on the video that we have already, the lecture that we have already covered, we can see that decay theory talks about how n-grams disappear. So forgetting is caused by disappearance of n-gram, and once the n-gram is disappeared, memory no longer exists anywhere in the system and it is classified as decayed. The other theory is displacement theory of forgetting, and under displacement theory of forgetting it says that new concepts displace the older concepts. So it's new memories pushes out the older memories. Next question. Which of the following is the correct sequence of reinforcement schedules in terms of their effectiveness in response rate and resistance to extinction? So when I talk about resistance to extinction, this would be the correct sequence. We'll see how. So first of all, let's understand the difference between ratio and interval. Interval means fixed number of time. So if I say fixed interval, it's after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So that's fixed interval. If I say variable interval, it can be after 3 minutes, 10 minutes, 13 minutes, 18 minutes, anything like that. If I say ratio, it's number of behavior responses that are same. So when it is fixed ratio, it's same number of behavioral responses. So for every fixed number of response behavior, you will have a fixed response. While under variable, your number of responses would be different, or the behavior would be different for each response. So this is how we understand. So usually ratios have much higher extinction as compared to intervals. So the highest extinction would be seen in variable ratio, because it is very difficult to predict the next line of behavior. So you have highest extinction under fixed ratio, then fixed interval, then variable interval, fixed ratio, and then fixed interval, and finally the continuous reinforcement. So variable ratio, then variable interval, fixed ratio, fixed interval, and finally the continuous reinforcement. So this would be the correct order. Next question. When a background interference procedure was used experimentally, which of the following findings became evident or apparent? Now we have already done 2 questions on field dependence in the previous set of questions that we have solved. So this time there were a lot of questions that were asked on the concept of field dependence and field independence. As I had previously said, field independent people usually have the tendency to differentiate better. That's the only key thing that you need to remember. So if you are clear about this, you can solve any and all questions on field dependence and field independence. So field independent person would have very good ability of differentiation. So even if there are interferences in the background, he would be able to understand the background and the foreground. So that is how field independent people perform better than field dependent persons in case of background interference procedure. So there were few tests that were done. One was embedded figure test, and there was Burner visual motor gestalt test that was done to understand this. Next question. People with moderate mental retardation would have an IQ range of, so it's 35 to 50. So you have mild, range of mild, then range of moderate, range of severe, and this is profound. So that's a direct question that you need to know. Next, which of the following is not typically found in a school guidance counselor's office? So school guidance counselor's office, what is his job? His job is to do hands-on activities or hands-on exercises with the students. So he might have a sandpit that would be as a means of time calculator. He will do psychometric test on the students. For small students, he can have puppets and play-dohs. But lie detector is something that usually won't be found in a school guidance counselor's office. Next, which of the following social factors play an important role in educational setting? When it comes to educational setting, there are a lot of things that affect an individual, especially when we talk about social factors. So social factors, one of the most important social factor is competition among peer group, influence from the peer group. So if your friend is doing in a certain way, you would be prompted to do in a similar way. So influence of peer group, role modeling, our teacher does like this, so we must follow similar patterns or something like that. You have competition, that's between the students. And then you have finally the feeling of cooperation, that's again within the members of the class. So all of these four are social factors that play an important role in educational setting. So the correct answer would be all of the above. Next question. The concept of object permanence can be seen in the stage of sensory motor, that's 0 to 2 years. It's usually seen, it starts around 4 to 6 months of age, and by 18 months we say a child is fully able to grasp the concept of object permanence. Next question. You have to match the various types of social influences to the correct match on the other side. So you have symbolic social influence. It results in mental representation of our relationships with others. Then you have normative social influence that talks about the desire to be liked by others. Informational social influence that talks about social influence based on the desire to be correct. And finally you have obedience, which is a form of social influence in which one person orders to perform some action. So this would be 1. Now the next set of 5 questions are based on the passage. So it's very important to understand this passage first, then we'll move on to the questions. So what is asked here is, I have highlighted this, the effect of interpolated learning is moderated by anxiety. So let's first understand what was the experiment. So experiment says there were 200 subjects which were divided in the group of 50 each. Now under each group of 50, these were 50 group of high anxious people and these were 50 group of low anxious people. Okay. Now under these two, both, there was an experimental group and a control group, experimental group and a control group. They were given a learning list. So the first was given a learning list of A, and then they were given some CVC words under list B, and then they were asked to recall A. Under the other set, they were given list A, and then they were given some cancellation task which was equivalent to the time for the CVC trigram for list B, and then they were again asked to recall A. Their scores were compared, and the only information that is given here is the standard deviations were found to be comparable across the groups. Treating recall scores as the dependent variable, the appropriate ANOVA was carried out. So recall was considered as a dependent variable and ANOVA was carried out based on that. And the only thing that you know was ANOVA was significant at 0.05 level, and then F ratio was calculated which was significant at 0.1 level. That's the only thing that we know. We do not know in what fashion the results were correlated. Now let's move on to the first question. Which of the following design is used in the above research? So the above research uses a kind of 2 by 2 mixed factorial design. Because under 2 by 2 factorial design, what happens is you have 2 by 2 is between the subjects. So you have two variables and two values which are within the subject. Sorry, 2 by 2 factorial you have within the subject. Under 2 by 2 mixed factorial you have values between the subject and within the subject. So you have first anxiety, which is high and low. Okay, now here anxiety is one variable, that is high and low, and on the other side you have interpolated learning, present or absent. So that's another variable you have. So you have between group and in group values, and finally you try to have the effect of this interpolated learning from the people who are less anxious or high anxious on recall. So these are the things that you have into consideration. So you have this as a 2 by 2 mixed factorial design. Now next question. Which of the following statement is true in context of above studies? So above study, it says ANOVA is satisfied or is significant at 0.5 level. That means the test comes to be significant, and there are three characteristics or three basic assumptions we consider under ANOVA which proves a test to be satisfied, which are the basic assumptions for ANOVA. So the first is the dependent variables are normally distributed. The next is homogeneity in the distribution of data. Homogeneity of the variance is satisfied. So that's again correct. And the last is you have independence in the number of observations made. So third is independent observations made. So these three assumptions, if satisfied, prove that ANOVA would be statistically significant. So assumption of homogeneity of variance was satisfied is the correct answer. Now this is something which has not to do with the question itself. You just need to know about ANOVA and you can answer this question. Next, on the basis of the information provided about the main effect of A, what can be concluded? Now what can we conclude here? We can conclude that there can be there is effect of interpolated learning. So the effect on the interpolated learning can be either in the increasing fashion or decreasing fashion. So if it is increasing or improvement in learning, we call it retroactive facilitation. If there is interference or decrease in learning, we call it retroactive interference. So since the last paragraph says that the results are comparable, we do not know in what way they are comparable. Either they are positively correlated or negatively correlated. Therefore, we can say there can be either improvement on learning or there can be interference in learning. So either there would be retroactive interference or retroactive facilitation in this case. Next case, we have to find out the degree of freedom for the F test, which is very simple. So for the columns you have 2 minus 1 into 2 minus 1, that's the number of groups. So you have two groups of 50-50 each. So you have 2 minus 1 and 2 minus 1, so that would be 1. Now for the other thing, that's the number of subjects. You have 50 subjects in one, so it's 50 plus 50 minus 1 plus 1, or we can say 50 minus 1 plus 1, 50 minus 1, and you again add those, so that would be the same. So it's 100 minus 2, that's 98. So the correct answer would be 1 and 98. Next question. Which of the following conclusions can be drawn about the researcher's hypothesis? From this, we can say anxiety moderated the effect of interpolated learning, but there is no conclusive evidence given in the passage that suggests whether it is positively moderating the effect of interpolated learning or negatively moderating. But we know it is definitely moderating. So D would be correct. then there is not full data that has been presented to evaluate the hypothesis. Because if there was full data, we could have said that it is either positively affecting the interpolated learning or negatively affecting the interpolated learning. So we do not have full data is again correct. There is nothing being referred to about the verification of hypothesis. So the only choices that can be correct is C and D. So that would be 3. So with this we cover the paper 3 on psychology for December 2015. We will be covering the important topics that have been asked in this paper in the further lessons that will help you before June 2015. You can subscribe to Examrace channel to watch these videos further. Have a good day ahead.